All right, today we're just doing a quick discussion of a book I read. It's the Ian series. I've already read both part 1 and part 2. This is part 1 called Sentient Bonds. I can't remember what part 2 is called. I read like 5 books over the course of a couple of days, so they're all kind of mixed up in my head. But I really liked this book. I like the way it's written, and I really like the characters. Our main character is Asher, or Ash as everyone calls him in the book. He's a high school student around the age of 16 or 17, I believe. And he's being raised alongside an AI or robot called Ian in his father's basement. His father is a bit of a mad scientist, and we're first introduced to Asher and his personality through his hookup with his old friend Cass in the high school locker room. He doesn't really want to go through with it because anybody could walk in at any moment into the showers, and they do. Some of Cass's football teammates walk in, and Cass doesn't want to be caught, being gay. So he punches Ash twice in the face, and Ash, like banking on their old friendship and him being a bit of a bleeding heart, knows that Cass, who's abused at home, will be attacked again. Could you get down? Will be attacked if his dad learns he's gotten in trouble at school and done anything to affect his potential future football career. So he ends up getting suspended from school, and his dad has to come and pick him up. And his dad, rather than checking on the bruise on his face, is irritated that he had to miss work because of this. And we can already see the emotional neglect that Ash faces at home. And this makes him sort of cling on to crumbs of affection and forgive easily when someone who's hurt him, he keeps allowing them back into his life. And his mom is sort of in the same field of that. She's a more emotional person, but I find her to be quite self-centered in her emotion. She's married to this man called Brian. Brian doesn't really like when Ash comes to stay with his mom at times because he sort of views Ash as a romantic rival. And his mom sorts of dismisses all of these interactions between the two, talking about Brian is on his own path. Like, no, that's your son. And that Ash, the teenage boy, should be more forgiving of Brian rather than asking her husband to be an adult. One night Cass comes over talking about let me in. Ash doesn't want to do that anymore because he's found out that Cass, while hooking up with him, is still with his girlfriend Harper. He didn't want to be like on that kind of down low. He didn't mind being like a screw around, but he doesn't want to be part of cheating with someone. He forbids him from coming back to his house, and the robot Ian overhears this, and he's sort of been let off his, like, he's usually plugged into his system in the basement, but his dad has started letting Ian sort of roam about. So Ian overhears Ash forbid Cass from coming back in. So the next time that Cass shows up, after Ash has sort of forgiven him again, he grabs Cass by the throat, and he said, Asher Bell forbade you to come back to this house. And this gets the family in a lot of trouble because Ian is part of a government experiment, and they become even more involved after this because they tell him it's not safe for this robot to be in your home, so he has to come and stay at the base. And Ian doesn't really want to do that, so he lies to the family and also tells Ash that his dad want him to put in a certain code, and this code makes him crash for like a day or two. But yeah, he did all that just so he wouldn't have to leave the house. And this really tugs at Ash because this robot, he grew up with this robot, they played together, and he always, when he was little especially, he viewed him as a really good friend. If the robot fell and its leg came off or something, he would treat it like any other child would treat another child. He would check to make sure he wasn't hurt. He'd help him walk, even if the robot didn't really need that. So when he sees that Ian, who they grew apart for a little bit because they were always being pitted against each other by the dad, and he always saw his dad as loving the robot more than he loved him. And this is on top of finding out when he stayed with his mom that he used to be twin. When the cells split, one of them sort of died. So his dad used those cells because he was going to be a baby named Daniel, named after his dad's dad, because Ash is named after his mom's dad. But he used the cells of Daniel to help spark the beginning of Ian. So Ash sort of looked at that as maybe his dad using Ian to cope with not getting that son that he wanted, but he later realizes that he was putting his own emotions onto his dad's actions when his dad just sees Ian as an experiment. He doesn't really see Ian as a person or a son or anything like that. Ian is just his work. Ian is just something that can always be improved upon. And he's just getting a lot of attention right now because he's the best that his dad has. But when later in the book, when his dad realizes that there's an extra step that they can go, he has no emotional attachment to. We do later realize that his dad, I would relate his mental and emotional capacity towards other people's feelings as, Shelton from The Big Bang Theory is sort of like that. He always rolls his eyes and huffs when he has to dumb things down for his son. But he does really care for Ash. And the reason he would always send Ash off whenever things got too emotionally intense is because he thought Ash's mom would be better equipped to handle him in those conditions. But when you read the book, you see that's not really the case. His mom is a bit flighty with her feelings, and one of the things that stands out the most in Ian's mind about her is the way she just waved and left when he was a child and his parents got divorced. Like, no fighting over him, not trying to get him or anything like that, just like passing him on the doorstep and being like, bye, son. Emotional attachment issues come from both sides of the family. He has another friend called Pilar. She has a really big family and they live close by. And when he goes to eat with them, he says in the book that he has all of these warm, fuzzy feelings, but he also has the desire to punch someone in the face when he's there because he sees what he could have and he knows that he doesn't have it. So while he really likes being over there, it also shows him what he's missing. I feel like I've gotten off tangent. What was I talking about? But earlier in the book, when we first learned that Ian was partially created with Ash's brother's DNA, I was like, is this going to be a sort of twincest thing? But we later learned after his dad is like, your DNA is just not going to work out for this robot. He scraps it and replaces it with the DNA of a young cadet called Ty Rogers because he's much more suited to it. And poor Ash, he's like so hurt and crashes out over this because he's like, Dad doesn't want my DNA because I'm gay and because I'm an idiot. But his dad is like, God, that's not the reason I didn't want your DNA. It's because you're too emotional. It's because of this, that, and the other. Because these robots are being built to replace humans in war zones. They can't be emotional. They can't be sad when somebody else gets hurt. They can't be worrying about all those sorts of things. He's like, son, you're sensitive. You're an artist. Your DNA is not going to work out for this. And while that soothes Ash a little bit, there's still a part of him that's like, my dad just doesn't like who I am. Like, we're too different. But they sort of get a little closer at the end of the other book. But when we first start seeing that Ian might be more emotionally invested in Ash than anyone previously thought is when he starts pretending to be Ash's dad through text messages. It's a little creepy, but I really love this book. But he pretends to be his dad, and anytime something happens, he's like, what are your feelings about this? What was your emotional response to this? Your friend Pilar, what are your feelings for her? Your friend Pilar snuck in. What's that about? Like, he's really interested in Ash's emotional responses to things. Ian also sneaks into Ash's studio. Ash is a painter. He sneaks in and looks at his art. He just wants to know more about him at this point. And he also tries to impress him with some of the videos from the war zones he'd go to, and he ends up making poor Ash sick with that. Ash didn't understand at first that the battles between him and Ian, they weren't just for his dad or to make him feel dumb or anything like that. Ian saw it as opportunities to impress Ash with his skills and knowledge. I mean, he's an AI. He's got all the skills and knowledge, but he saw that as his chance to really show how good he was getting. He didn't know how badly he was hurting Ash in those instances, or that Ash saw it as him taking his dad from him. But when Ian is taken to the base after the Cass incident of holding him by the throat and constantly warning Ian to stay away from the person who punched him in the face, he has to stay on base. I think I already said this. He has Ash crash his system. Ash's dad sort of really likes how proactive Ian was in that instance, how much he's becoming not just a robot, but he's also a bit concerned about how much he's not in control of him anymore. But Ian starts sneaking out of the base that he's supposed to stay in, one, because he's bored, and two, because he wants to visit Ash. And one moment that I really liked was when Ash asked Ian if he remembered all the times they used to play together in their childhood. And Ian was like, yes, I've kept them in my files. Do you remember those times? And Ash was like, yes, I've also kept them in my files. Like, it's just so silly and cute. He does keep giving Cass other chances. So Cass one day invites Ash to go to some party out in the middle of the woods in his girlfriend's cabin. Ash, being the constantly forgiving guy that he is and putting his own trepidation on the back burner, he agrees to go to this party, and he's mostly left to his own devices, even though Cass was the one who invited him there with all of these people that he's not friends with at school because he is a bit of a loner. He accidentally sends a text message to Ian that he's trapped at this party, so Ian breaks out of the facility again and completely destroys this log cabin just so that Ash will have an excuse to leave. Cass has gotten completely drunk at this party, and Ash, even though he constantly keeps being treated terribly, but he wanted to drive Cass home because Cass is completely inebriated. But Cass uses this opportunity to further show everyone how much he's not gay, how much he's not Ash's friend, right in front of the whole party. And then he just drives off, and he ends up getting into a car accident. Of course, he's messed up really badly. Ash later goes to visit him in the hospital, and one of the doctors is like, "Are you Dr. Bell's son? Wouldn't he be able to fix it?" Because Cass is missing both legs and an arm. Cass's dad begs him. He's like, "Please, can't your dad fix this? Go talk to him for us." And so he does. And this is when you can really tell that Ash's dad will do pretty much anything to, one, this is a good chance to experiment. Two, he doesn't like to see his son sad, like doesn't know how to deal with the emotions. But two, he does care for his son. He just has a hard time caring for his son. So he agrees to do this experiment and make Cass part AI, because this Ty Rogers guy, he does have one of Dr. Bell's prosthetic arms where they can control it neurologically. So it's like having another arm, but better. But he does this to most of Cass's body. And since there's so much damage, including some brain damage, they have to sort of combine, him and one of the technological systems that he used to make robots like Ian and that whole robot series. Ty Rogers, he's really jealous about this because he loves his little robot arm. He wants to be the best of the best. He's like a little gung-ho soldier guy. And he's like, "Ash, do you not see how great it is that he gets to be part of this?" And Ash is like, "These people are sick and twisted. You wish you were brain damaged, and so does my dad, so that he would be able to do this experiment on you." Ty, he really wants to be full robot with his own brain and personality, of course. But this bionic arm is like showing him how he can be even better than he is now. And he doesn't really like Ash because he sees Ash as being a undeserving son to someone so smart and capable as Dr. Bell, bootlicker, brown noser. But he's only like 19 years old. He's only 2 years older than Ash. And he gets a little bit more interested in the Ash and Ian dynamic when he realizes how different Ian as a robot is around Ash, that he's much more person-like. And after the incident where Ian rescues Ash from the cabin, he completely gives up on pretending to be a robot around the team at the base. He sort of tries to mimic Ash's body movements, his relaxed postures. One night he tries to like lay in the bed beside him, but he's a robot, so he's like made out of metal and he's about 8 feet tall, so he's too heavy for his bed. But yeah, it's so cute. Cass does end up waking up at the end of book 1, and the first thing he does is kill his father, that abusive mofo who deserved to die. But yeah, he kills him straight away. But one moment that shows you how Cass has never been, not very caring of Ash as a person is when he first wakes up. He grabs Ash's arm and Ian has his other arm. And if you know the story from the Bible with the baby, where the king is like, where these two mothers are grabbing on this baby saying it's theirs, and the king is like, to cut him in half and each of you get half. One just lets him go and says the other woman can have him, and that's his real mother because she wouldn't want the baby harmed. That's the sort of thing that we see here with Ian and Cass, because they're both super strong robots at this point, and they're each holding his arms, and like he starts to feel some extreme pain because they're gonna pop his arms off like a little Barbie doll. And Ian lets him go first because he does not want any harm coming to Ash. After Cass crushes his father's throat, he ends up breaking out of the lab. I don't understand why they wouldn't have him strapped down in the first place. Usually in books or movies, when they do these weird sort of experiments on somebody, they'll strap them down or at least have like more protections around. But he broke a guy's neck and broke a window and then darted right out of the complex and was on the lam for a couple of weeks, starting at the beginning of book 2. And in book 2, most of it is them using Ash as a lure to try to get Cass back to base so they can work on him. Ash keeps running into these little models built, and at first he thinks it's his friend Pilar because she has gotten more into sculpting. He thinks it's her leaving these things around from their childhood, but turns out it was Cass trying to lead him to this little fort that they built when they were younger. And they managed to convince him to come back to base, and also to convince the army not to kill him straight away so they can do more experiments on him, try to figure out how to combine the AI better with the human mind. Ash is also required to go to base often. I felt like that was a bit of a convoluted plot point just to get him, in the base, to try to get the other robots to be more personalized like Ian is. And he tries to do some of the exercises him and Ian used to do as a child, try to get them to finger paint, play on the playground, stuff like that, but they don't really see any point in it because they're military robot. Ty Rogers also doesn't really see much point of it. He might as well be a military robot himself. Ian continues to break out of base in order to see Ash. One night Ash is at this bar he has a babysitter who's like a big sister to him. He's at her performance with her band at a bar. One of the guitarists wants to take him home because he thinks he's cute, and so he drives him to a sort of secluded location, and he wants to touch him, and do a little so-and-so in the dark. But Ian shows up, shining a bright light in the car. The guitarist thinks he's about to be arrested, but Ash knows it's Ian that's shown up, and he takes him off to a little park. And he's like, why are you acting like a jealous boyfriend? That wasn't even in his head until Ty Rogers said it. He was like, the way the robot is behaving around you is very strange. He's acting like he's your boyfriend. And he was like, that's not the case. But when this happens, he's like, you really are acting like a jealous boyfriend. And the robot is like, I am your boyfriend. He's like, whoa, he decided that himself. But he's like touching him, and he's like, I want to experience soft. I want to know these things that other humans get to feel. Ash is like, we can't do this. Like, you can't be touching up on me like this because you're not human. And this really hurts Ian's feelings. But Ian, being the good guy that he is, he would never abandon Ash off by himself. So he tells his babysitter to come get him from the park that he left him in, so that he doesn't have to walk home or call an Uber. But turns out when Ian gets back to base, him and Ty Rogers have a conversation that Ian doesn't know about, that Ash doesn't know about. That's why I'm really interested in reading if there's going to be a book 3. I don't know yet. There was really no announcement at the end of book 2 if there's going to be a book 3. Ty and Ian came to the agreement that they would merge. That way, Ty would have the robot body of his dreams, and Ian gets to have a human body that can feel, softness, and that can smell the things that Ash smells, that he can eat food. He gets to be with Ash as a real human boyfriend. But Ty and Ash don't really have friendship, let alone romantic relationship. Ty doesn't see himself as gay, but he's like, I'm willing to do all of this stuff just so I can get to have this robot body. Like, how is that going to work out? Like, I'm really interested in getting to book 3 if there's going to be a book 3. Will Ash be able to wrap his mind around this? Because when Ty was telling him that was the agreement that him and Ian came to, he kissed Ash. Ash was like, get off me. Like, he wasn't feeling that at all. So how is he going to come to terms with being in love with Ian, but in a body and with part of a personality that he doesn't really vibe with? Because, I don't know, I worry that Ty is too emotionally distant like his father, but also Ian will be in there with all of his love for Ash. So how mentally, how will that work for Ty? Will he have to force himself to fall in love with Ash? Is part of him, does part of him already like Ash a little bit, because he did like rub his lips after the kiss with a strange sort of intense expression on his face. And he sort of blushed when Ash caught him in plain clothes, like eating a hamburger. Does he already have some feelings for him, you know, inside? And one of the secret reasons that he wants to be combined with Ian is so that he can be a full romantic partner to Ash. I don't know. But anyway, that's one of the books that I've been reading recently. I did skip quite a bit of stuff, so there still would be something for you to read if you do plan to read the book. But it's what I would call light sci-fi. Sci-fi light. It's more romance than anything. But yeah, it's really good in my opinion. Bye.